Good evening and welcome to another episode of Shattercast, and tonight we're going to be talking about how to create a sustainable content machine. So content machine, you probably hear that term a lot. Essentially, it's a way of being able to create, capture, document your content and be able to get it out on a consistent basis. And the key within that is consistent and consistency. And there's first thing is, what does consistent mean? So, consistent, does it mean once a week? Does it mean once a day? Does it mean 20 times a day? We've spoke about this on the show before. I think it was in the very, very first episode. But essentially, the way I see consistency is, it's got to be frequent, but it's got to be at a frequency that is sustainable for you. You can't burn yourself out too early. And this is where sometimes I disagree with some of the influencers that are out there who play a big volume game because they're at that level, who often say, post 10 times, 20 times, 50 times a day. You're going to run out of content before you know it, and especially if you're not used to creating and building content. So to have a consistency at a frequency that is sustainable for you is the best way to go. So sometimes that can take a little bit of trial and error to find out what is the best sort of frequency for you, what you can sustain. And as long as you keep giving value through that, is absolutely fine. Last thing you want to do is hate. I think this is something, Alex, you've mentioned before, is you don't want to resent or dislike the fact that you're making content, because then you won't be making content at your best. So we're going to talk about creating a content machine. So talk to me, first of all, Al, what your thoughts are. You've built a lot of channels, you've worked on a lot of YouTube channels, etc. When you first come into creating a channel, what's your sort of mantra going into it when it comes to creating a content machine?
Yeah, good shout. Well, I think, which is like consistency, it's all about. So for any channel, for anybody who wants to either build a channel or get noticed, obviously, we know sort of being consistent is in having a formula and sticking to it. Whatever that formula is, whatever the format is, you stick to it, because that's when you get results. And the people that have like bursts of productivity but then don't do anything for 6 months, versus the people who do a small amount of stuff but they do it every day, or they do it continually, they're the ones who are going to get the traction over time. Because content, even though you definitely can get results in a very short space of time, the winners are the ones who focus on it for the long time. Like you build up these assets. So what you have to do is just kind of work out, well, what is the system that works for the business, works for the person, works for you? And there's not like a one size fits all system, but there are certain things that that you need to do. So for example, even just time, putting it in your diary, like what's the part of your week or the part of your month, like basically when are you doing it? Because if you don't have some time in your diary assigned to content, it's not going to happen. Like it's as simple as that. Like when do you do your content? Some people have, I'll take a couple of hours on a Sunday to get my content done. I'll take 1 day a month. I'll take 20 minutes a day, whatever it is, whatever the tempo is that works for you. Is actually having it in the diary. So it's having the time, then it's having the system. Okay, in that time, what am I actually doing? And if you break it down to things like getting ideas, getting titles, getting scripts, filming, editing, posting, and like metrics or feedback, like if you break it down into a certain number of stages, it's like, okay, when am I doing it? Who am I doing it with? And that's part of just consistency, because when you actually have that stuff down, when you have a plan, you can be consistent. And the only other bit I'd build on that is just like try and make it, and this comes back, I think, Joe, to something else we were talking about earlier, is make it fun. Because if you have something in your diary that you're dreading or not looking forward to, how long are you actually going to do it? Not, you're going to do it like a couple of weeks as just like almost like a New Year's resolution, then it's out the door. If it's something that you enjoy doing, and content can and should be a creative, collaborative, fun process, you're going to do it more. So that's just the basics, I think. Have time, have a system, and make it fun.
It's also how likely are you to do it? Because if it's in your calendar and you're not enjoying it, you're more likely to go, I can fit a call in there and I'll just push it back. I'll fit a meeting in that and I'll put it to the day after. You're more likely to postpone that and push that on. Nate, what do you think about consistency, mate?
Yeah, it's about having a plan. For me, it doesn't really matter what that plan is, as long as you have a plan and your audience and you know when you're going to show up, whether that's weekly, monthly, even if it was, right, I'm going to do it the first Monday of every month. And then your audience will learn to know that you're going to show up on the first Monday of every month at the same time. By all means, test it and find out when suits best, especially from not necessarily suits you best, but also suits your audience best. There are two sides to the coin there. But actually, it doesn't really matter when that is or how often that is. That, to me, that's irrelevant. Yes, people will go and say, let's do a huge play and send thousands of videos a day out. But if your audience know you're going to show up and where you're going to show up and you're giving value, they'll follow and you'll attract the right people. So yeah, for me, it doesn't really matter. It's about having that system. It's about having that plan.
And I think you said something in there as well. You said test. So testing and measuring as well is also like, get yourself a measuring stick. Like, if I would always rather people, and I recommend this to our clients all the time, that if you are new to putting content out there, if it's not something that you've done a lot of before, or you're just a bit unsure about it, start lower, build your way up so that you can get the reps in of actually creating content, articulating your content, putting it out there, putting the feelers out for what's valuable, and you'll start to see what your audience interacts with. So you'll start to get ideas of what your content can be about, but also how often and when to feed your audience based on where they are and what they like. And you can use that to test and measure over time. That's basically marketing in a nutshell, isn't it, Alex? It's marketing is test and measure, refine, analyze, and go again.
Yeah, but I mean, it comes down to, like, you have to have an amount of data for it to make any sense at all. It's not like, oh, I'll put a few videos out and test the water. No, you probably got to commit to maybe a month or two of doing stuff to even have any data that's worth testing. And in terms of, like, when I've worked on people's channels or people's content, you can pretty much tell by the way they plan and by the fact that they have one how successful it's going to be, because what they will prioritize is the time or the process over the quality. So, like, for example, there was a channel I worked with in the medical niche in America, and the guy came in and he's like, I don't know how any of this works, but he's like, but I put the time in my diary. I've committed that every week I'm going to have 3 videos on my YouTube channel. And he did. And the fact that he had it in his diary, he had it in his system, he had a public commitment to his team he was going to do it. So I knew he'd be fine. Now, yes, after he'd been doing it for 6 months, he built up a massive channel in his particular niche industry. But that first month of content was like, he'd cringe when he saw it. He'd be like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And that's good. If you're not looking back at your original content and not like having some type of like, I've got so much better, but you have to get over that initial hurdle. Now, there's other people I've worked with who have done the whole, like, you say to them, when are you recording? When are you posting? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm just kind of getting the ideas together. I want to be good. I'm practicing a lot. And those are the people who will never get around to it. The people who are like, no, I'm doing it. Like, one guy told me, he's like, what did he say? He was just doing like small videos basically on his phone, but he was doing it consistently on social. And he's like, I'm at the gym every morning, Monday to Friday at this time. That's in my diary. That's non-negotiable. Then I get in my car and I drive to my office. In the 5 minutes that I'm out of the gym in my car, as a daily ritual, I'm going to take my phone out and just talk about stuff for 5 minutes, whatever's on top of mind. And he said, I fully expect it to be total crap, like, for a while. But he's like, that's not my goal. My goal is not to be Alex Amosi. My goal is to do a 5-minute video every day when I'm out the gym. Now think about that. That's in his diary. It's part of his daily routine, and he's focusing on something that's totally within his control. Not whether or not the video is good, but whether or not it actually gets done. So I think, and in terms of measurement, when you've committed to it, when you've got, say, 30, 60 days worth of data, as you say, that's when you can go back and say 80-20. Which of these things, which of the small amount of things has actually been getting the most traction, the most likes, the most comments, the most watch time? And I tend to always go for comments. If I can have an idea, spark an idea that actually gets people to comment on it, that to me is like, that's the holy grail of content. That's what I want. And the more that you do that, the more you train your brain. You'll be walking down the street and go, oh, that's an idea that's going to get some comments. I don't know if you guys agree, because that's just how it goes. When you do it for a while, you train your brain to become better at creating content.
It's almost like getting muscle memory in doing it, and that's what you need to do. And one thing a lot of people, I've seen them talking about a lot recently, so I'm not sure what's re-sparked this resurgence in it, but time blocking and actually really packing, rather than going, oh, I've got a bit of free time here, really packing out that calendar with detailed things of what they're going to be doing. Include content creation within that. Content ideation. That's a word, isn't it? Ideation. Content ideation. So actually coming up with the ideas. Give yourself time to sit and go, I'm going to clear my desk. I'm going to clear my mind. I'm not going to be distracted by this, that, and everything else. I'm going to spend a bit of time where I'm going to go, what ideas can I come up with? Maybe do a little bit of research as well. We've got loads of ideas on the past episode that we've done about ideas. You can go and research that one as well if you want to. But you use anything that you can find to create those ideas, put it within that time, and create a routine out of it. One thing I will throw out is if your guy is doing 3 YouTube videos a week, that's no mean feat. That is a difficult thing to do, and that's a difficult thing to maintain as well. So it's not a starting point I'd recommend, definitely. But I'm so glad you went into the time thing, because again, it's one thing that is a conversation I always have when we get new people on board, is that one of the first things I try and find out from them is, what are you in this for? Are you in this for the long game, or are you trying to get quick wins? Because if you're going to try and get quick wins, it's not nearly as effective. Content is a long-term game, because it's, especially when you look at the strategies that we implement and put together, and when you try and create something that's evergreen and that can work way off into the future, you need to put a lot of time in at the beginning, not a lot of time and effort of like doing all the nitty gritty of the work, but you have to put the time and the consistency in at the beginning to work on building that trust. Trust is built over time. So you've got to put the trust in, put the value in.
So I said earlier was that there's a number of steps that involve it, from whether you're capturing it, whether you're doing posts, uploading it, copy, scheduling. There are a number of steps that entails. And one thing I found, you mentioned there, was time blocking. And from a sales perspective, salespeople are notorious in that they'll do anything other than pick up the phone and actually make calls. 9 times out of 10, the amount of teams that I've worked with, where sales advisors are adverse to picking up the phone and spending that time dedicated to just making calls. And yet that's where the headwind is. That's where you make your progress, is time blocking that specific time. And what I found over my career is that the more that you dedicate the time to do something and apply yourself 100% to a task, regardless of whether that's video creation, whether that's sales, whether that's marketing, the more sustainable the results will be, and the better the results will be over time as well. I mean, another fact on that is around the amount of people we've worked with, Joe, in terms of we've given them 90 days worth of video content, or up to 90 days worth of video content. And that just creates overwhelm, in that nothing ever gets posted, because actually they've got too much content. They don't know what to do with it. And that comes back to not having a plan. If there's no plan in place, it doesn't matter how much content you've got, it never sees the light of day, because you don't know when to post it, how to post it, where to post it. So it goes straight back to what makes a sustainable content machine. It's having a plan.
Have a plan, have a journey, have a strategy, know where you're sending people. I see a lot of people talk about playing the volume game, visibility. It is good for visibility to play a volume game, but it's not going to maximize the impact you can have on what you're trying to achieve if you don't know where you're sending them. You've got to have a next logical step to push them onto.
Yeah, but it's also like, as you say, the intention has to be sustainable, because it's a bit like if somebody's like, okay, I want to get fit, so I'm going to go to the gym for 8 hours a day, and I'm only going to eat chicken and broccoli. And you go, you're going to do that for 3 days. You're going to get sick of it. You're going to go to McDonald's. If you're like, oh, I'm just going to watch my calories a little bit, and I'm going to go to the gym at least 3 times a week, great, that's manageable. That's a doable goal. So if you're like, yeah, I'm going to be Alex Hormozi, I'm going to have videos all over the shop. It's like, okay, if you've got like 50 grand a month budget and a huge team, fine. But for most of us, and that's not even that useful, essentially, for most business owners. And I think it comes down to, like you're saying, about when you have a system. So if I'm working with somebody and I want to sort of start tracking, whether it's me or somebody else, I'm like, okay, where is this being tracked that's visible? Because you have things like, so who, what, when, and why. So first I want to be like, why are we doing this at all? And there'll be some type of goal. I want to create the YouTube channel for this type of person who want this, or I want my content to speak to and eventually I want to generate, build an audience. So you have your why. Then you need a place, whether that's like Asana, Trello, ClickUp, whatever, pick a tool, doesn't matter, as long as you use it. And then it's like, okay, what are the actual actions that need to happen? Great, well, we need to collect ideas. So it's like actions. Who's doing each stage? What are they doing? When are they doing it? Always have some type of timeline, always have some deadline. And then, and so it's like, okay, great. We're going to collect all of the ideas here. Then the copywriter or whoever's going to script titles here. Then the ones that are selected are going to move here, and we're going to do a script or an outline. Then they're going to move here, and we're going to film them. Then they're going to move here in editing, here to social posting. Then we're going to collect the data like once a week, once a month. We're going to just tally up how many people on our channel, how many people on this, and then once a month we're going to look and we're just going to ask ourselves, what have we learned? How do we create better content? What's the data? How do we get 1% better every week? If you just ask yourself that. And that's a simple process. Like, it's not rocket science. You can set it up in 10 minutes. But if you have a system, who's doing what, when, that's going to get done. If you don't know who's doing what, when, and if it's you, by the way, and you can do it all yourself, that's totally cool. But if you don't have that system, if you don't have that accountability to yourself, this is where people struggle to be consistent and create the consistent system. Is they're always starting at a blank page. Oh, I know I need to do some content today. Maybe I'll do it after lunch. Oh, no, hang on. No, I've got that call. I'll do it after. Oh, what am I going to talk about? Oh, is the lighting all right? Oh, I don't like my face when I said that word. Oh, and it just goes. So it's like you got to turn from amateur to professional, and professionals aren't better. They just get stuff done. A professional actually just does the work every day that needs to be done. And so that's just kind of my thought about how to create a system. It's not difficult. It just actually needs to get done. But you need to break it down into manageable chunks, and not be the guy trying to, go, deadlift in the gym on day one of a workout plan. You're just going to kill yourself.
and that's exactly how that pro got better. It is consistency and practice. And like I say, it kind of throws back to what you said earlier, and how your early stuff is always going to be your worst. And it literally goes for anybody. You go back and look at anybody. It can be your favorite YouTubers. If you're not into YouTube and you're into TV and it's actors or TV hosts, look at their early stuff. Go back and watch their early stuff. Look at the audition tapes. Look at anything you can find, even if it's just for a bit of fun. And you'll see they're terrible at the start. But the consistency of actually doing it made them into the pros they are today.
I did an exercise a couple of weeks ago where I looked at comedians in their early years, because comedians often have that trait of it's practice, it's doing it. They often go to small comedy shows where there's a handful of people to practice for the big events that they're going to be putting on in huge stadiums and things like that. Even now when they are professionals, because they want to hone the skill and they want to get better before they give it to a mass audience. And actually, I was watching a Kevin Hart video of him when he was a teenager and he was coming up, and he was telling his story where he had to learn how to do it, and the only way he did that was by practicing it. But he was also then getting encouragement and advice and influence from other comedians that were seeing his stuff, or people that were in his space, and saying, actually, what you need to do is add a story. You need to create a story arc. This is how the story arc works. You can tell mini jokes and you break it down into mini jokes, but actually they're all the same joke or leading up to the end joke. And it's the story arc that creates the impact. But it was the way that he went through each stage. As you said, looking at these first videos, they were terrible. They weren't funny. They were funny, but they weren't as funny as he is now. But they just had no point to them. He wasn't telling a story. He wasn't creating emotional draw to it. There wasn't anything about his family, where he always has something about his family now, so that you've got that connection. And that's owning your craft. And that's the same with video. The more you do it, the more you own your craft. You may not want to be a videographer or in video, but you're owning the craft of the reason why you're doing video, whatever that may be.
It's finding your voice, isn't it? Because when you talk about comedians, it's like, they often, when you look at a comedian's early work versus often when they make it big, they suddenly find their voice. They find, oh, this is the kind of material I should do. And as you said, Nate, that comes down to like, they will work for free in all these little comedy clubs for years. They will record every performance. They'll go back through the recording. What got a laugh? Did I say something a certain way? And then when you're seeing them being like effortlessly funny, it's like, well, that's probably 6 months of grinding work. But at a certain point they go, oh, I've got it. And it's the same with business. Like the same way a comedian will have like, oh, I've found the jokes that work for a particular set. A business owner will be like, I found the messages that make my audience respond to me. And then you'll go back to their greatest hits playbook again and again. And people are like, how do I find new stuff to talk about all the time? You don't. You just find new ways of saying the same things, because that's what your audience needs to hear. They need to hear your greatest hits over and over again, because you never know when you're going to say that thing, and they might have heard it a million times, but suddenly they go, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I need. And that's what you've got to dedicate yourself to showing up for your audience,
It's this idea, it's the idea of perfectionism. But, and I think that's probably one of the biggest procrastinators people put into content is, I've got to get it perfect. I've got to get the right light. I've got to get the right camera. Often content usually comes down the list of things when they're procrastinating. Whereas, put the content first, get out there and practice. Because ultimately, if you accept the fact that your early stuff is going to be your worst, and that's where you're going to make a lot of the mistakes. That's where you want to make a lot of mistakes, because no one's watching. So no one cares about your mistakes if no one's watching. So get them out the way early, get your practice in, get better, so that when the audience begins to grow, you're already well on your way to refining your craft and refining your ability to articulate what you do. So one thing I would like to move on to actually is some tangible stuff, stuff that people that are listening, who are watching, can go away and they can actually try for themselves or do for themselves when it comes to trying to create their content machine. So let's do it in a chronological order that you do when create content. So we'll start with ideation first. I'm still using that word. I'm still not 100% it is a word, but I'm going to run with it. So when it comes to actually creating the ideas, there is tools out there. If you're not a creative person, you're struggling with that. So the first one I go to before an actual tool is something that actually Nath said that Kevin Hart was doing within that, which I think is actually a really powerful thing and often underrated. And it's either collaborating or at least surrounding yourself with other people on that same journey. Preferably people who are slightly more ahead than you are. There's the whole concept of you never want to be the smartest person in the room, because if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So it's the same as this. Surround yourself with people who are also trying to get visible, trying to get themselves out there, because creativity loves creativity, and it will just spark more and more conversations, more and more ideas. So in a one-to-one human world, then that's one way of doing it. And then on from that, if you really struggle, if you haven't got those sort of people around you at the time, and you're trying to find ideas and how to create, obviously, like I said, we went into that in a past episode, but I do want to touch on a few bits. Obviously, the one that's around at the minute is ChatGPT. So using AI to help you come up with ideas. And Alex is our resident master in all things like this, so I'll let him explain a bit better than I do, because you do a lot of this, whether it's with some of our content. Obviously, it's not a use AI and let AI completely create your content. It's like use it as the initial spark to your creative fire. What's your approach? How do you start your idea journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to do it. I'll touch on ChatGPT because it's useful, or any kind of AI tool. I mean, one of the things in terms of any type of content creation is like, I say this as a copywriter, is like you've got to be prepared for the first couple of drafts to be bad. In fact, you actually got to go through it. So if I'm writing social posts, what I tend to do is I'll open a Google Doc and I'll write down a number of just random ideas. I'll go look at stuff. I'll just get a bunch of ideas. And then I'll write probably 3 or 4 posts that are just the first things I think of that are bland, boring, cliche. And then I start writing what I actually think and feel, because my brain starts to kick in and go, hang on, what do I actually think about this? What do I actually feel? What's nobody else actually saying? And then I'll start writing from that position. Then I'll scrap what I was writing before, because I've actually tapped into something that I actually want to talk about that lights me up and interests me. So whenever you're doing content, like people have this thing about, I don't have an idea. And it's like, well, you get the idea by writing or by speaking or by doing it. You often have to do it, and you have to get through. Like if I'm writing copy, the first 3 pages I'll write will be terrible. But I know that I've got to get to page 3 so I can scrap it all and actually start like saying what I actually want to say. In fact, that's a good thing to ask yourself, like, what am I actually saying? What's the thing I actually want people to take away? Well, say that. Like, don't say the warm-up. Say what you actually want people to say. And what you can do with ChatGPT is you can just speed up that process, because you can get ChatGPT to give you more ideas. Like typically, obviously, what you have to do with ideas is you have to go, okay, I just need some ideas. Like, what are my audience looking at? What are they talking about? What are my competitors saying? What's been happening in my day recently? You have to ask questions and come up with a bullet list of all the different stuff. And then you have to go, okay, which of these do I actually want to talk about? Then what you can do is you can essentially use ChatGPT. So you can give ChatGPT a load of stuff and say, what have I missed? What else is there? Give me 20 other ideas like these, and give it a function, like act as a content consultant, act as a copywriter, act as a YouTube expert, act as a marketing expert, whatever it is, and give me 20 more ideas like this that will appeal to whoever my target audience is, because you need to tell ChatGPT who you're writing for. And so basically you can just speed up that process. Now, as you said, Joe, like, don't take everything it gives you and just be like, okay, copy and paste, that'll do. Because oftentimes it's not there yet. Like, unconsciously, we know when we're reading something that's written by ChatGPT, because we do. So if everything you're putting out there is written by a robot, essentially, you're going to come across as robotic. Even if it looks pretty good, people are unconsciously going to be like, they didn't actually bother to write this, so why should I bother to read it? So what you've got to do is extract out, use it to speed up the process, use it to extract out more ideas, and then put it into your own words, or at least, put yourself into it. Great, this is actually a good post, but how can I add to it? How can I make it like have my flavor, my taste, as opposed to a robot? And that's the bit most people miss, because if you just, we live in a world full of artificial images and posts and everything at the moment. It's only going to get worse. So if you actually give the 5% of extra time and thought to it, you'll be the winner, because you'll be more authentic.
So it's more important than ever to be human. And I'll say this again, and it's probably going to be quite a theme in this episode, but even with ChatGPT, there's no silver bullet. There's no one prompt. There's no one question you can ask it, which is going to give you everything that you want to pull out of it. Like you say, you need to go deeper and have that conversation. One thing that you showed me that I love doing now, and I do it with most of the stuff every time I use ChatGPT, is I get ChatGPT to ask me questions. So I'll explain what I want it to do. I'll have the conversation. I'll put everything out of my head that I can think in there, but then I'll also add on that, ask me 10 more questions that you need to know to be able to develop this further, or give me a more detailed answer, or whatever I'm looking to achieve. And then it pings you 10 questions back, and you answer all them 10 questions, and it gives you a much better thing out the end of it. And then you can take that idea, and then you can add the human touches to it, add your own stories, add your own experiences, add your own opinions, your thoughts. Like, positioning yourself as a thought leader means you need to have thoughts. You can't just rely on the AI to have the thoughts for you. It needs to be you. It needs to be your personality. It needs to be your language. Everything that makes your personal brand. So we move from there then, and then we can go through to actual creation of content. So when it comes to creating the content, obviously we shoot it. That's pretty much straightforward. Get a camera, get your phone, whatever you want to shoot it on. There's all the different things to look out for there. And then we come down around to the editing. So we spoke before, we had an episode around shatter content and what shatter content is and what it actually means, which, just as a quick recap, it's taking long form and it's shattering it down into shorter and shorter forms for multi-purpose use across different platforms. And again, like we say, we'll heavily lean into actually having a strategy behind that rather than just playing a volume game with it. In terms of, there is platforms now that you can use for that. And I'm going to mirror something you said earlier about ChatGPT and AI in general, Alex, is the platforms are good, but they're still not quite there. There is still a lot of stuff in it which can be really frustrating. So one of the platforms I've played with, and sometimes we use it just for this as well, quick turnaround stuff. If you've shot a long video and you want it shattered out into smaller pieces, we use something called Opus.pro. So the concept behind Opus is it's an AI system which will take your video, it will essentially transcribe it, it will use whatever's behind it, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's a different AI system, to read into what that transcription says. And then it will try and pick out what it thinks is of value. Now, Opus, one of the reasons I like Opus, and I feel like this is one of the better ones around, because there is a number of them. Well, the reason I feel like this is one of the best ones around is I've been there since it was very early on. I was actually in the beta, fan club. I was in the beta group of people who were testing it and using it and supplying feedback. And it's nice to see actually some of the feedback I've been given has been implemented. And that's what I like about it, is they are very, very regularly updating their systems, updating the algorithm, updating the AI, updating what it offers. So it is constantly moving, which is really good. So it takes those bits, what it thinks of value, chops them together, put some transcriptions on it. Sometimes it will move the camera around a little bit. Like I said, that it can be hit and miss. Sometimes the camera moves in the wrong place and you have to try and readjust it. Sometimes it transcribes you wrong. Sometimes it just doesn't transcribe you at all and it just leaves a big blank patch, which is annoying. So in terms of, if you want a quick, rough and ready, get it out there, and you're on the early part of your journey into content creation, I think this is a really good tool. If you're looking to up your game a little bit, then you're probably going to want to look at something with a few less limitations. So even when we cut these down and we put these through Opus, more often than not, actually, with all of them, there's not been one I've just took out and used. I've taken it out, I've brought it into the editor, and then I've still had to edit it anyway. So there is still an element of human within that, which is why it's still helpful to have people in and around you that can help you do these things, and why having people who know how better to utilize these systems can really be beneficial to what you do. Because ultimately, you're still trying to run a business. You're still trying to do your normal day-to-day. And content creation, content distribution, content ideation, these are all just whole new job roles that you're trying to learn and trying to fill. But I've just noticed the time we're cracking on, so I'll look to try and wrap it up a little bit. But so, but once you do all this and you do this effectively, again, coming back to customer journey, you can lead people down the right way and you can lead them effectively to turn them into a warm lead. And then Nath, I just want you to speak to really quickly, like you're usually at the end of that process where they've gone through looking at the content, they found you, you've established your authority, you've built that trust with them, and now they're ready to make some kind of connection with the business, the brand, or the person. What is the real impact of them being taken on that journey, rather than just seeing a paid ad where they kind of go, that looks kind of cool, I'm going to get in touch?
You've already built that know, like, and trust. They've watched hours or minutes or whatever that length of time is. I think it is the key, really. So it just enables you to have a relationship with somebody before you've even spoken to them. For me, that's the real power of it, is that when you pick up that phone, they already feel like they know your company, what you stand for, your why as a business, and how you can help them. 9 times out of 10, they're reaching out to you because they've seen something that's gone, I resonate with that, or that person. I mean, we've had it a number of times this week where they've gone, I felt like that video was talking to me. That to me is the power of it, because you've already built the relationship, you've already built the trust, and you can position yourself as the expert that can help them, because you know that the problem they've got you can solve and support with, or at least as a bare minimum give them their ideas. But what we find more often than not is that once they get them into that position of, okay, so they're talking to you, it's understanding what are those next steps look like from a sales perspective in order to take that next step of whether it's a phone call, whether it's a demonstration or a Zoom call where you're or face to face in the office. What's the next steps that you need to take to convert them? But yeah, overall, it's just that building relationships, really.
And then there's a whole system after that about nurturing them and taking care of them. And I think that we'll probably look at that one in another episode. And I think I'll wrap this one up by, if you don't mind me having a shameless little plug there. You can see at the bottom of the screen our free online training, the Content Funnel Secrets. So this is essentially kind of everything we've been speaking about. Like I say, we lean heavily into customer journey, leading people down to take them from a cold prospect to a warm lead in an evergreen, ad-free way that can just continuously create inbound leads over a long period of time. It works on creating that trust. It's heavily built around a lot of what we've spoken about in that online training. Like I say, it's absolutely free. We take you through every step of it. We show you the strategy that we use with ourselves, what we use with our clients and our partners, and you'll get to see every step of it. You'll get to see all the graphics and all the stuff that we normally keep within our discovery and strategy calls that we have with our partners and clients, and hopefully give you a really good understanding of what not just what we do, but how you can do it for you and your brand as well. So with that, I think this has probably been one of our longer episodes. Well, I think it was difficult to shut all of us up. So with that, I will say good night, and we will see you next week.